Joining me right now is California Congresswoman, member of the House Foreign Affairs and Financial Services Committees, Young Kim. Congresswoman, it's good to see you. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Maria.
So you just heard that commentary from your colleague on the left. Is this who's running these negotiations, the progressive left? She says that if the president agrees to any spending cuts, there's going to be real backlash from progressives, and there's going to be backlash in the streets.
Well, first of all, we cannot create a financial crisis due to our congressional members' inaction. Look, American people are not buying the political game that President Biden is selling. He's the one who refused to come to the table to negotiate for nearly 100 days. And also, I'm hopeful because our speaker and the president and with our top negotiators are continuing this dialogue. I'm hopeful that we're headed in the right direction to come to a agreement that will reasonably raise the debt ceiling while reducing spending. Look, we are currently projected to pay more than $600 billion in national interest alone. We need a solution. So the House acted and passed a common sense bill that will reduce spending while reasonably protecting and strengthening our key programs like Social Security, Medicare, and even the Veterans Benefits Program that the Democrats keep saying that we are trying to gut. We are not. That's not it's not on the table for us.
So what is on the table away from putting caps in spending? Because the president says, look, okay, he'll accept spending cuts if there's revenue raised. He wants to raise taxes. Are you going to cave on that?
I'm not okay with that. When we currently have $32 trillion, we cannot settle our future generation because of our inaction. When, we need to take care of this right now. It is our responsibility. Raising taxes is not the solution because we don't have a revenue problem. We have spending problem. We need to find reasonable ways to reduce spending. And all we are asking is just let's go back to the spending level just a few months ago.
Yeah.
And is that too much to ask when we have $32 trillion in national debt right now?
Congresswoman, it's really ironic that the lender is China, that we are borrowing from China, our number one adversary in the middle of all of this. Now we understand China's Commerce Minister will meet with U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo for a dinner in Washington, D.C. tomorrow night. The Wall Street Journal is reporting this morning, that there's a dinner that Gina Raimondo is hosting for her Chinese counterparts. He's also expected to meet with U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai in Detroit later this week. What can take place here? We already know that the trade imbalance is pretty severe, that we're buying many more products from China than they're buying from us. Would you be in favor, would you support removing the most favored trade status from China?
Absolutely not. Look, China is the second largest economy in the world, only next to the United States, and is still using that title to game the system. And it is using its influence in the Indo-Pacific, using the Belt and Road infrastructure needs. Look what they did to Sri Lanka, for example, right? They are using that special status to game that system. We need to make sure that American dollars and technologies is not helping China to, exercise their economic coercion. We see that Xi Jinping and Chinese Communist Party is not interested in doing anything following the international rule of law. We need to make sure that we strip that special privilege away from them. We cannot help them to game the system. And right now, this is a time when we should be showing our support to our allies and partners in the Pacific. This is really sad that because President Biden waited until the 11th hour, he had to cut his meeting short in Japan to come back to continue the negotiation on that ceiling. But what it did was it showed weakness on our side. We looked like a weak, unreliable partner to our key allies and partners in the Pacific. We need to show them that we have their backs. But instead, President Biden turned his backs on them.
Well, okay. So just to be clear, you do want to revoke the most favored nation trade status that China currently holds.
Exactly.
The new ambassador to the United States, the China ambassador to the U.S., arrived in New York City yesterday, and he warned that relations between the U.S. and China are, quote, facing serious difficulties and challenges. President Biden commented on the future of the U.S. relationship with China at the G7 summit, but here again, the president refuses to see China as an adversary, instead constantly calling it a competitor. Watch this.
We're not looking to decouple from China. We're looking to de-risk and diversify our relationship with China. That means taking steps to diversify our supply chains, and we're not dependent on any one country for necessary product. It means resisting economic coercion together.
Yeah, Congressman, what about that answer? Meanwhile, Congressman Michael McCall told us that Xi Jinping has already stated his efforts, and that is he wants to make the world dependent on the Chinese supply chain so that he can cut it off when he deems appropriate.
Well, the members of the G7 must coordinate our responses to counter China's economic coercion. We need to send a strong message what PRC is doing using the Belt and Road Initiative project developments into the developing countries who truly need help. We need to make sure that we are coming together to so that the Americans are together, and then we're not we need to make sure that G7 come together to show a united front and counter this. Look, I just had an Indo-Pacific subcommittee hearing on PRC's economic coercion. They're showing us that they're really serious about becoming the #1 superpower, surpassing the United States. We need to show that we are together. We can still lead in the world.
Yeah, I have the notes from that hearing, and they're using unfair trade practices, including illegal subsidies, forced technology transfer to achieve that market dominance in critical sectors, as you mentioned, Congresswoman.
Sure. We need to protect the interests of the Americans and the American businesses doing business in China, because China, as you heard, and my colleagues also said, they are welcoming you in the first few years, but they will steal your IP. For example, one of the witnesses at my subcommittee hearing is that there are some of the ex-employees, they actually stole the IP and created a competing company in China. And so they are suing those companies right now.
That's exactly what they did to Motorola. I wrote all about that in my book, The Cost. You're absolutely spot on. And that is why we say rob, replicate, replace, which is John Ratcliffe's word. That is the Chinese strategy for American businesses.